Sometimes, when a game ends, the result feels inevitable, as if it could never have happened any other way. What if that same illusion has shaped our entire worldview? A man was watching a video. The video said, imagine you're an astronaut. Your spacecraft has crash-landed on an unknown planet, and you've lost contact with mission control. Your onboard computer reports there's no oxygen, no water, the temperature is minus 200 degrees Celsius. You think to yourself, that's it, I am done. But then, in the distance, you spot a house. You walk inside. To your surprise, there's oxygen, a comfortable temperature, there's water, and there's even food in the refrigerator. Would you assume that this house was formed by the natural processes of the planet? Of course not. Someone must have built it for you. In this cold and hostile universe, Earth is that house for humans. Evolutionists say you're just an insignificant accident. But look around you. Earth was created for you. The man thought to himself, yes, that makes sense. God must be behind it all. Just then, his daughter walked in and said, Dad, why is it always rich people who win the lottery? The man said, why do you think that? She said, I was looking at the list of lottery winners. All of them are rich. The man said, no, many of them were poor before they won. The lottery doesn't choose rich people. You're looking at the story backwards. Then he remembered the video. He thought, what if that video made the same mistake? What if it was looking at Earth's story backwards? So he went to a friend, a biology professor, and said, Earth seems perfectly suited for human life. It has oxygen, water, and the right temperature. So surely it was designed for us by some intelligent being. Why don't many scientists believe in God? The professor replied, the goal of science is to understand reality. It doesn't insist that reality must or must not include God. So it neither accepts nor rejects God. The man said, but doesn't that leave us in permanent uncertainty? He replied, uncertainty is what keeps us honest. Science doesn't start with answers. It starts with observation, evidence, and testing. If a claim lacks sufficient evidence, it's not accepted, whether it's about God or anything else. I can explain evolution to you, but remember, like all scientific conclusions, what I say is supported by evidence, but it's open to revision if better evidence appears. The man said, alright, how can Earth not be designed for us while everything seems perfectly suited for our needs? Take oxygen, for example. No other known planet has breathable oxygen. He replied, if you could see Earth 2 billion years ago, you would see oxygen as a sign of death. The man said, how can that be? I know the earliest living things were single-celled organisms. They absorbed nutrients from their environment and reproduced. What happened after that? He said, everything began with reproduction, and one other thing, mistakes. As single-celled organisms reproduced, their numbers grew, but reproduction was not perfect. Small mistakes occasionally occurred. The offspring were not always identical to the parent cell. Tiny differences appeared, unplanned and aimless. The man asked, if it was unplanned, then how did it proceed so accurately that it ended up creating humans? He replied, the process was not accurate at all, and that's what made it so powerful. A goal-driven process only moves toward its goal, so its results are predictable. But evolution moved in any direction. Countless possibilities were explored, making the results varied and unpredictable. That's why life on Earth became so diverse. Humans were just one outcome among many, not the goal. The man said, tell me more about it. He replied, some of these aimless changes made organisms less survivable or less reproductive. So those lineages gradually declined or disappeared. But occasionally a change helped an organism survive or reproduce better. So those lineages spread. Over time, disadvantageous changes tended to disappear, while helpful ones spread. The man said, so it was extinction that filtered those random changes and determined which ones remained. He replied, exactly. Organisms that fit their environment survived, while those that didn't gradually vanished. And many changes weren't especially helpful or harmful. They simply opened new paths that future changes could build upon. The man said, so the entire history of evolution emerged from random variations. He replied, yes, but Earth's changing environment played a major role too. Earth's temperature, atmosphere, and ocean chemistry changed over time. Many species that had thrived very well for millions of years went extinct after each change. Meanwhile, new opportunities opened for others. Reproduction, variation, survival of the fit and extinction of the unfit, environmental change, a new meaning of fitness. This cycle repeated countless times. The process moved toward greater adaptation, not because it had a goal, but because organisms that couldn't survive simply didn't remain. The man said, "Interesting, but why does the one planet we live on happen to contain oxygen that we need?" He replied, "Now the story gets really interesting. You think Earth is suitable for life because it has oxygen. But our earliest ancestors survived precisely because Earth had no free oxygen, because they were anaerobic. To them, oxygen was highly toxic. But after hundreds of millions of years of random variations, some organisms evolved the ability to use sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to produce sugar and oxygen." The man said, "So the ancestors of plants appeared." He said, "Exactly. Sugar was an energy-rich food. Oxygen was merely a byproduct. So while other cells had to search for food, these new cells could make food from sunlight. As a result, they spread. And as they spread, oxygen levels slowly rose. Oxygen was extremely dangerous to early organisms. So when oxygen increased, it triggered a massive mass extinction known as the oxygen catastrophe. But oxygen accumulated gradually over hundreds of millions of years. So there was enough time for aimless changes to give rise to organisms capable of tolerating it." The man asked, "But when did oxygen-using cells appear?" He said, "Before oxygen became abundant, cells relied on anaerobic ways of extracting energy from sugar. Fermentation is one example. Some bacteria still use it today. And as before, random variations continued to occur, and eventually some cells appeared that could use oxygen to release energy from sugar." The man asked, "Was that a major advantage?" He replied, "A huge one. Oxygen-based metabolism produced far more usable energy, so these cells flourished, and extra energy helped make more complex forms of life possible, including the multicellular organisms that eventually led to animals, plants, and humans. Though that's a fascinating story for another time. And remember, each of the stages I just described took hundreds of millions of years." The man said, "So maybe I've been looking at Earth's history backwards. For the apparent fit between humans and Earth, there are simpler explanations than supernatural design." The professor said, "Yes, humans were shaped by Earth's environment, not the other way around. People often forget that today's world is only one temporary stage in Earth's history. So they assume that the present moment was always the destination. We now can't even imagine life without oxygen. The same thing that once killed many of our earliest ancestors to extinction. But oxygen later helped drive evolution toward organisms that depended on it. The same principle applies to many other environmental conditions, including temperature." The man said, "I still feel like there has to be a God." He replied, "That feeling is part of the story too. And remember, so far we haven't disproven the existence of God. We haven't even ruled out the possibility of design. We've only shown that neither assumption is required to explain the story of life." The man said, "I see. But now I have two important questions. First, what about the things that make us human? Love, emotion, awareness, consciousness. I'm sure they can't be explained without God. And second, if we are just a random outcome, doesn't that mean that we are as insignificant as flies or bacteria?" The professor paused for a moment and said, "Great questions. I see you're ready for the next chapter. But now that you're thinking about the philosophical questions surrounding human existence, I think it's time for you to meet one of my colleagues. She has spent much of her life thinking about these very questions." The man said, "I need some time to think. I'll meet her soon."